This live stream, we're going to go over like 3 different intermittent fasting schedules. I've been fooling around with all these different intermittent fasting, time restricted eating schedules, before the holidays. Like every couple of weeks, I've been changing my strategies. So let's go over, these 3 different strategies that I've been doing. And I've been doing for about 2 weeks each. And we'll talk about the pros and cons. So maybe if you're looking for a different type of intermittent fasting strategy, if you want to burn some body fat, if you want to improve your health, I think you'll find this really helpful. This is good. We got Brent was here. Brent was here early, which I really appreciate. Thanks for tuning in, man. I appreciate it. Gene is here, which is great. I like seeing Gene. I know Gene is doing really well. He's lost a lot of weight already. Oh, that's great. Super chat. Incredible. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Let's get this thing started. And also, I love when you leave a comment. You let me know where you're from. We get people from all over the world, which is so exciting. And also, give me a thumbs up, like Gene or Brent, if the sound is good, the picture's quality is okay. If anything happens during this presentation, just let me know, and we'll make some adjustments. That's great. I really appreciate this super chat. I think you're actually, Gene, I think that's the first super chat I've ever gotten. So that's so exciting to me. I will never forget that. You're my first super chat, which is really amazing. I really appreciate it. Thanks. I'm glad you're doing so well with the weight loss. Okay, let's get going. Let's start this first one. And once again, I have a whole bunch of slides. Let me change my camera. Somehow we lost a good camera. And let's go over this first intermittent fasting schedule. Now, I did this schedule, I don't know, maybe about 4 to 6 weeks ago. I don't know if you followed it. If you followed a couple of my live streams a couple of times ago, I did one live stream about a month or 2 ago where I analyzed like 7 different studies, but I put so much work into that live stream. I did about 10 hours of work just like going over all these different studies. I read like a dozen studies, and I picked my 7 favorites, and we talked about it in the live stream. I'll link it below if you want to check it out. But like I said back then, a lot of the new research is indicating that it may make sense when it comes to like maintaining muscle mass, muscle hypertrophy, if you take in protein earlier in the day. And I always thought about, typically whenever I did my intermittent fasting strategies, I always would skip breakfast. It just works better for my schedule. But I decided for a couple of weeks, I'm going to break that rule, and I'm going to try to take in calories earlier in the day. So this is what I did. And if you noticed here in the slide, I did time restricted eating. Just so you know, the difference between time-restricted eating, some people call it time-restricted feeding, and intermittent fasting is that when you're doing like an 18-6 or a 16-8, if you do it every single day, people would call that time-restricted eating, time-restricted feeding. If you do it intermittently, if you do it once, twice, 3 times a week, if you don't do it every day, I would call that intermittent fasting, just so you know the difference. So this was the first schedule that I followed. And I have to say, if you notice, if you look at the my notation on the bottom of this slide, it didn't really work for me, because I like eating, dinner later in the day with my wife. But let's go over this protocol, because it really can work for a lot of people. So I followed an 18-6 time-restricted feeding protocol, meaning that I fasted for 18 hours every single day, and then I took in my calories within a 6-hour eating window. And like I said, I wanted to get in protein earlier in the day, so I broke my fast at 10 a.m. So I had my first meal at 10 a.m. in the morning. I digested that meal, and then I worked out around noon, which is typically the time I work out. And I have to say, one negative about this program for me, this schedule for me, is that I typically work out fasted. And I don't know how you feel, I found that I didn't even feel like I fully digested my meal for my 12 o'clock workout. If I was just doing a walk at noon, that's fine. But when I was doing like my hard resistance training, or maybe a high intensity HIIT cardio type routine, I feel like that 2 hours wasn't enough for me. So that's one of the negatives already right there. Then I would have my last meal before 4 in the afternoon. So I would kind of have like a late afternoon, really early dinner. And I have to say, that didn't work for me either, because I really like having dinner. My wife didn't eat with me. She ate later in the day, later in the evening, like 7 o'clock, like we typically would. So I ate my dinner alone. I didn't eat it with my wife. I also, I have to say, I got a little bit hungry around 10 o'clock right before I went to bed. So this particular schedule, even though I think it's very effective, and if it can work for you, maybe the science is leading in this direction, go with it. But for me personally, that's the key to this fasting, intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding. You got to find a strategy and a schedule that's really doable, that you're going to be able to stick with, somewhat indefinitely. And if I even made some notations here, I'm also a big believer in cycling my calories, meaning like sometimes some days eating more, some days eating less. So what I did, if you notice here, I did a 2-mat and a 3-mat. On the days that I did my resistance training, those are the days I want to increase my muscle mass, I want to create a response. I ate 3 meals a day, so I took in more calories. On the days when I only did cardio, like I did a long easy walk, a high intensity training, I only did 2-mat, I only ate 2 meals a day. So on the days I was only eating 2 meals, I'm eating less calories. On the days that I'm doing resistance training, eating 3 meals, I'm eating more calories, which in my opinion is a great way to minimize the slowdown in your metabolism, when you're restricting calories and when you're losing weight. So it's good to mix things up. Other strategies could be just take a diet break. Like you can do a strategy like this for a month, then you take a week off, right? Up your calories for a week, go to maintenance calories, and then you can start up again. It's a great indicator. It's a great way to minimize the slowdown in your metabolism. I don't know if you realize, you remember that crazy show, The Biggest Loser, when people lost those tremendous amounts of weight doing too much exercise, in my opinion, and restricting calories for too long. Those people, they looked at them like 6 years later with multiple studies, and it showed that they really damaged their metabolism. A lot of the people who gained all their weight back still had a slow metabolism, meaning that they had a 400 calorie reduction in their metabolism by doing those extreme things, like by restricting calories for too long, too aggressively, with too much exercise. I listened to a podcast today on the diet doctor, and one of the doctors there was just talking about these studies, which is really interesting. So cycling calories, in my opinion, is really important. And another reason why I wanted to do this particular schedule is to kind of stick with your normal circadian rhythm. I know that's a little bit. Circadian rhythm just means that it's your 24-hour clock. And the main doctor who does so much research on time restricted feeding and circadian rhythm is a guy named Dr. Panda, and he's a big believer in just doing things the same time every day. Meaning that in the past, and I'm going to go back to it from time to time, I used to like to vary my fasting strategy from day to day. Meaning that one day I would like to do a 16-8. The next day, maybe I would do an 𝘾𝑚AD. The third day, maybe I would do an 18-6. The fourth day, maybe I wouldn't fast at all because I wanted to cycle my calories and wanted to mix things up. And I do still definitely believe that that's good for most people. But Dr. Panda feels that sometimes you really want to stick to your normal circadian rhythm, meaning that get on a normal schedule. So that's part of the experiment that I'm doing now, sticking to a normal schedule. And once again, though, if you look at my note, so this schedule does not work for me, eating earlier in the day, but it really can work for you. So if you want to give it a try, leave some comments below this video, I'll respond to you. Let's see what Gene has to say here. Gene, Volta Longo says, it's a bad idea to skip breakfast. He advocates 12. Yes, I know. Gene, I actually did a video on that. If other people watching don't know who Dr. Longo is, he has his PhD. He's an expert on fasting. He wrote that book, The Longevity Diet, which I think is a great diet. He's a big believer in that fasting mimicking diet where instead of doing a water fast for 5 days, you do like a calorie restricting where you're only taking about 700 calories for 5 days. And he says you get all the benefits of fasting, but you get to take in some calories, so it's much more doable, much more manageable. Now, the reason why he feels he doesn't think people should fast beyond say 12 hours, like Gene pointed out here, is that he thinks it can lead to potentially having gallstones. He thinks that, as soon as you eat food and the liver starts working, bile gets produced and you start kind of kickstart your gallbladder. He thinks that if you're consistently fasting for beyond 12 hours, say you're doing an 18-6 and you're doing it for like weeks on end, he thinks it can lead to gallstones. But there's definitely other doctors do not think that. Dr. Jason Fung doesn't think that. Other people don't. Dr. Jason Fung, he's the doctor who wrote the Obesity Code, which is an excellent book. He's a big expert on fasting. That's somewhat debatable. I'll also link my video I did on that because I kind of talk about what every expert feels about that, the risk of getting like gallstones from being fasted. A quick note is, like, for example, even when I am fasting, and I am skipping breakfast, I do drink black coffee in the morning. And actually coffee, and I talk about this in the video, has caffeine, and caffeine is metabolized in the liver. So even though you're really getting in no calories, you can almost like jumpstart your gallbladder just from having a little bit of coffee in the morning. So that's another safeguard, I think, against what Dr. 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂 would say too. So I hope that's helpful, Gene. Okay, let's move on to the next schedule. Okay, so after doing that early, I would call that early time restricted feeding, I kind of switched to this schedule, and I actually like this schedule a lot, and I think it really worked well for me. And I kind of used a protein hack of taking an essential amino acids, and I'll explain to you exactly what I mean. Okay, so this is what I did following that early time restricted feeding. I used the 16-8 this time, and meaning that I fasted for 16 hours, took in all my calories with an 8-hour eating window, right? But this is what I did at 10 in the morning, because I wanted to take in a little bit of protein, but I didn't want any calories. I took an essential amino acid supplement. See, essential amino acids are basically the amino acids, the proteins that you have to get from your diet. These are the ones your body can't make, so it's really important. Like leucine is a big one for people who want to put on muscle. That amino acid particularly helps you put on muscle. And it has no calories. It's a little debatable on whether these essential amino acids would kick you out of a fast, but a lot of the consensus is they will not. Some people feel it might. My personal opinion is there's no calories. It's just an essential amino acid that it will not break your fast. So that's what I did. And I took up 𝘾𝙊𝘼𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂, which is Ben Greenfeld's brand. Ben Greenfeld's great podcast. I really like him. He's an exercise physiologist. He just puts out tons of great content. I'm a big follower of his. I used his brand, the 𝘾𝙊𝘼𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉 brand of the essential amino acids. I took them 10 in the morning. Then I kind of worked out a little earlier than I typically would have, which is a little bit of an issue for me because sometimes I have a client in my personal training gym, but I did because I wanted to work out right after these essential aminos. So I worked out fasted just with the aminos in me at 10:30. And then I went to a schedule that really works well for me. Like post-workout, I'd have my first meal, which is right around 12 p.m., which is just ideal for me, midday. And then I'd have my last meal before 8 p.m. in the evening, so me and my wife get to eat dinner together. And I really like this schedule. And then I did use that same concept of 2-MAD and 3-MAD. See, whenever I'm doing my resistance training, and I'm creating a response with my muscles, right? I'm breaking the muscles down, I'm doing metabolic stress, I'm doing progressive resistance, I want to make sure I'm getting in enough calories, taking enough protein. So those are the days where maybe I would eat 3 meals within my 8-hour eating window. But on the days when I'm doing my easy walking, days that I'm doing my high intensity cardio type training, I'll probably do 2-MAD and probably be in a calorie deficit. So I'm always toggling between getting the best of both worlds. Like I always want to reduce my body fat and I always want to maintain muscle or put muscle on. And by using this strategy of 2-MAD and 3-MAD and cycling my calories, I feel like I'm getting a combination of the best of both worlds. Plus, when I'm in a fasted state, obviously, I'm dipping into stored energy. I'm burning body fat. And I love this schedule. I'm probably going to go back to this schedule. You'll see in the next couple of slides, I'll tell you what I'm doing now, like pre-Thanksgiving, pre-holiday, which is a little bit more aggressive. But I really like this schedule. I would say the only negative for me, I don't know if like when you guys or gals are working out, if it's morning, pre-work, in the morning, in the evening, midday. For me, 10:30 is kind of early for my schedule because it kind of affected my job. I'm normally training clients, so I had to move people around. Secondly, I spent so much money on supplements and eating healthy. This was like an additional $50 a month. These are essential amino acids, like $45 a month. So it's another issue. I mean, is it really worth it? Another thing you could do, but it kind of will break the fast a little bit, is you can do, which would be much less expensive though, is you can do 1 scoop of whey protein powder. It has all the essential amino acids, a scoop of protein powder. It'll only be maybe 80, 100 calories. Yes, you'll get an insulin spike, but if you're working out, your muscles are going to suck it right up, hopefully. That's another way if you want to save money, but yes, it will be breaking the fast to some degree. I always say anything beyond 30, 35 calories, you're kind of like breaking your fast. That's why the essential aminos are a good way to go. But I also want to review, let's see, hey, oh, cool, thanks for showing up. Yeah, no, he read that too. Yeah, no, I know, that's, 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂 is concerned about gallstones. In my opinion, one of gallstones is, I don't know if you remember OptiFast, even Oprah Winfrey had an issue. She lost her gallbladder. Remember, when you go from eating like a lot of fat and then go to like a 0 fat diet, like extremely low fat diet, in my opinion, that's what gives you gallstones. Those dramatic changes from your body being used to fat to no fat. That's why a lot of people lost their gallbladder, had to get their gallbladder removed from going from like just even a normal fat diet to like a no fat, a very low fat diet. But I think you're okay fasting for 12 hours consistently, or 14 or 16 hours consistently, and just take a diet break every 5-6 weeks. I don't think you're gonna have an issue with your gallbladder. Okay, let's see what Gina has to say here too. Okay, I'm doing my workouts for 30 minutes a day on weekends at 6:30 a.m. That's great. Then just take a whey protein shake before going to work. I think that's a great way to do it. I mean, ideal. I do think there's something. There was that great book, and I lived by Nutrient Timing, that came out. It came out like 20 years ago. We're talking about that. There's that whole concept of, you have a little bit of a window, a better window for protein synthesis, for like storing carbohydrate in the form of glycogen in your muscles. If you do take some food in, take some calories in post-workout within like the first 45 minutes. It's a little debatable nowadays from mixed studies, but I still think there's something to it. And I think it's a great time to taking calories, because just think your muscles are just primed to soak up the protein for protein synthesis and for storing away carbohydrates in your muscles in the form of glycogen. I think it's a good move. I think it's a good move, Gene. I think that's great. Okay, let me just slip this over here. Let's go. I also want to talk about, just before I go over on to the last schedule. Let's see what we got here. Okay. I also read skipping breakfast is associated with that increased risk. It's interesting. Who talked about that recently? A new study came out along the lines of that. And another guy that I really follow, Dr. 𝘾𝙊𝘼𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂. He's a Harvard graduate doctor. He's like a longevity expert. He did I'm on his newsletter. I love his podcast. If you want to check out an amazing podcast, it's called The Drive. I'm also a member of his private site. It's called AMA, where he does a little more in-depth type things. He gets very technical. Sometimes I even have to spend a lot of time looking things up. And he analyzed the study that was talking about things like that, like what are the negative effects of skipping breakfast. And this is what he determined after studying the literature, and he goes into it really in depth. He thinks there was like other reasons why people who skip breakfast had issues like that, because typically it's a difference when you make a conscious effort to skip breakfast, like to improve your health, to keep insulin levels low, and you're eating well. It's different than the typical person. Like when they were doing these studies, they would just like question people, like, do you skip breakfast? Do you smoke? How do it's not like they made a conscious effort. So typically the average person, because most people think breakfast is the most important meal of the day, the average person who skipped breakfast was not a person who was living a healthy lifestyle. They typically were like much higher percentage of people who skip breakfast smoke, right? Don't eat healthy. He made all these correlations when analyzing the study, and I kind of agree with that. I think the typical person who wakes up in the morning, skips breakfast, he smokes a cigarette, or maybe has a cup of coffee, light and sweet, would fall into that category. But I think the typical person who makes a conscious effort to maybe experiment or try intermittent fasting and say, I'm going to skip breakfast, I'm going to eat healthy, I think you're way better off. So I don't know if I totally agree with that, but it's a good point to bring up. Let's say we say, okay, in the hardening and narrowing of arteries due to a buildup of plaque, according to research published in the Journal of Cardiology. Yeah, no, those are all the studies he looked at, and I kind of do agree with that. But hey, this skipping breakfast, this intermittent fasting stuff, is still relatively new when it comes to different studies. So you can't say for sure, but in my opinion, I think it's really okay to skip breakfast. I think it's a good thing. Any way to reduce calories. It's different if you're already at an optimal weight, or maybe obviously certain people shouldn't do it if you have eating disorders. Obviously, if you're pregnant, if you're a younger person still growing, and maybe even women during their period may not be the best time to do skipping breakfast and doing fasting type things. But overall, I think more and more research is going to come out consistently in the future showing all the benefits of this intermittent fasting. Oh, he's back to taking apple cider vinegar. Yeah, I'm a big believer in apple cider vinegar. There's really some good science behind it. I do a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in mineral water. In fact, I have one right here, because I had a little something to eat right before this podcast. It definitely minimizes the spike in blood sugar post meal. I think it's a good thing to do. I take 1 tablespoon, I mix it in a little mineral water, and sometimes I even put a pinch of salt in this as well. I think it's a great way to control blood sugar. Sometimes even when I'm eating like really, really low carb and do that, it almost, I think it may even lower my blood sugar too much. Berberry does the same thing. I've never tried Berberry though, but I would like to. Okay. Yes, right. And also, and yes, and it works good for acid reflux, correct? I know. Some people say that no science supporting it, but it seems to work. I know it's helped you. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay, let's go. So, I also want to talk about, besides these schedules, besides, I always talk about three things in which creates a healthy diet and creates optimal weight. One, food quality. So in the next, food quality, which I want to talk about in the next slide, calories and how many calories you eat does count, and then food time, like we're talking about here with the intermittent fasting. So on these first two schedules, before I go to the third schedule, let's talk about like kind of what my meal plan was, so you kind of get an idea if anyone wants to follow along. So if you know me, and if you're here, I'm sure you do. I really do like that low carb, whole natural food diet. So what I did for the first two schedules, I didn't change my diet. I ate my normal healthy diet. So what I pretty much did is I took in 100 grams of carbohydrates every single day, which is 400 calories. And most of my carbs come from those good healthy vegetables like I typically eat. Hey, Mike. Oh, hey, who's out there? Hey, great, cool. That's Tony. Hey, Mike. I'm back at the 2 weeks of diet break. That's great. I think it's a great thing to take a diet break, get right back into it. Great for long-term weight loss. Great for keeping the metabolism up. It's going to work for you. I'm glad you did that. That's great. Okay. Like I said, I've taken in about 400 calories a day, mostly high fiber vegetables. I mean, if you follow me on Instagram, I post my meals there every single day. So that's where my 400 calories of carbs come from. I'm always a big believer in taking in an adequate amount of protein for sure. So I took in about 150 grams of protein every single day when I was following those two schedules. My general rule for that is 0.9 grams per pound of lean body weight. I know that could be kind of complicated because who knows exactly what your percent body fat is. I think you can even just take your total body weight and times it by 0.9. I'm a little bit of a believer in eating more protein. Great thermic effect. For every 100 calories of protein you eat, you're going to burn up 30% of those calories just digesting, processing the food. There's numerous studies, showing how eating protein minimizes your appetite, helps you maintain muscle mass, especially the older you get. So definitely don't cut back on protein when you're doing these fasting strategies. Make sure you're taking in enough protein for sure. Cool. Thanks. That's great. Okay. The other thing I did, I didn't particularly, on these first two schedules, I didn't track my fat calories, even though I know most of my calories were coming from fat because it's just the type of foods that I'm eating. See, that's the key, I think, to eating, like getting your macros right. I think you should always keep an eye on your carbs. Make sure you're taking adequate enough protein, but you don't necessarily have to count fat calories, because if you're eating things like I eat, if you're eating whole eggs, right? If you're eating fatty fish like salmon, sardines, this is the cornerstone of my diet. If you're eating normal meat, you're eating red meat, you're eating like chicken thighs, right? You're going to get most of your calories from fat, and if you're using like extra virgin olive oil, I saute all my vegetables with extra virgin olive oil. Even if I'm making like chicken breasts, I coat them with extra virgin olive oil. Most of my calories are coming from fat. At least 50, probably even close to 60% of my calories are coming from fat. And that's, I think, that's the way to go for sure. So I stuck with my normal diet for these first two schedules. Okay, let's talk about what I'm doing now. And I started this week because it's really interesting. The average person will gain anywhere between 7, which is really incredible. It will gain anywhere between 7 to 10 pounds from Thanksgiving to New Year's, which is really incredible. From going out to partying, a little drinking, to eating a little bit more. So based on that, not that I'm going to overdo it, but I figure, I haven't been in myself in like straight up ketosis, where my liver is converting body fat into ketone bodies like beta hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, acetate. I haven't been in like straight up ketosis in a while. I may dip in and out of ketosis doing those other schedules, but I said, you know what? For the next couple of weeks, at least until Thanksgiving, let me get into ketosis. So I decided that I'm going to kind of change my fasting schedule and get in ketosis for a week or two. And this is what I decided to do when I started this Monday. Okay, so this is the first schedule. What I'm going to do every Monday, which I already did this past Monday, is I'm going to fast for 24 hours. which is not that hard for me to do. If you're new to intermittent fasting, time restricted eating, I don't recommend you start with that, but ease your way into it. And on that particular day, that's a day where I'm just going to take a long, easy walk. I drink my black coffee, I drink my green tea or herbal tea, I drink my mineral water. It's really not a big deal. I actually look forward to that day. And what's that going to do? That 24-hour fast is going to deplete my stored glycogen. I'm already eating low carb, so it doesn't take much for me to empty out my muscles and my liver from glycogen. So almost by the end of that Monday, I might even almost be in a mild state of ketosis, but maybe not quite. Oh, this is great. 𝘾𝙊𝘼𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂 here. Cool. Thanks for stopping in. This is great. All my regulars are here, which is so wonderful. Thanks. So I'm going to do that 24 hours on Monday, maybe almost get into a mild state of ketosis after fasting for 24 hours. And then I decided, if you notice on the bottom, that I'm going to stick to a pretty strict carbohydrate restriction. I'm going to be 50 grams of carbs or less for the day. And it's just going to be like those vegetables and maybe a little bit of nuts, things like that. I'm going to really be pretty strict. So by day 2 or 3, there's no doubt I'll be in a mild state of ketosis. And I'm not looking deep ketosis. I'm talking like 0.5 to maybe 1.0. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's see what Tony did. I went back to 100 grams of carbs, vegetables, and I feel better. And I lost 2 kilograms. That's great. But I increased a lot of my total calories and protein. I used to be OMAD, about 2,000 calories. Now, I know the protein is it's so important, I think, to make sure you're getting an adequate amount of protein. And what do you say about OMAD? I used to do OMAD. I know OMAD, I know we talked about this before. I think OMAD is definitely a good short-term strategy, for sure. But it's really hard to get in enough protein, to get in all, enough of the essential vitamins, minerals, and nutrients if you're consistently doing OMAD every single day. You can do it for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month, but then you got to take a diet break. But I think I would look at an OMAD more like a 24-hour fast. Like maybe you do OMAD once a week every Monday. You just pick a day. I used to do it every Sunday. I would do OMAD. But I'd give myself not a 1-hour eating window. I'd give myself like a 2-hour eating window. But I did a video, I think, that which I actually liked the video even though it didn't do well. I don't think, it's so hard sometimes getting the right title and for people and the right thumbnail for people to click it. But I did a video talking about what I would consider to be more of a long-term strategy for OMAD, which is eating 1.5 meals a day. You have your one normal big dinner type meal, like a nice big piece of chicken, fish, or meat with 2 different colored vegetables. But then you do half a meal where you're taking in another like 20, 30, 40, 50 grams of protein with maybe an avocado. I think that's more sustainable long term with diet breaks than just to do straight up OMAD. Let's see what Brian. Oh, Brian's here too. Hey, Brian, thanks for tuning in. This is great. Thanks. Cool. Okay. So it's like what change. So now I'm seeing right now. I know I'm in ketosis because I've been doing this all week. I've been doing I did my 24-hour fast on Monday, eating 50 grams or less of carbs a day, and this is the actual schedule that I'm following. Let's see what Gene's got here. Mike. Okay. Tell me your preference for 30 minutes workouts. Okay, 10-minute cardio, 20 minutes resistance, 15 minutes cardio, 50 minutes, 20. I would mix it up, Gene. I would look at it like this. You definitely want to do resistance training and create a response, a couple times a week, maybe 2 to 3 times per week. I would say a minimum of twice. I think you can get a great resistance training workout in as little as 10 minutes. I think 20 minutes is great. As long as you do those big basic movements, like your push-ups, your squats, your lunges, things like that. When it comes to the cardio, there's 2 types of workouts I'd like you to do. I think you can do a high intensity, like a HIIT type training cardio workout in 10 minutes, easy. Warm up for 2 minutes, do 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy. Do that 5 times. You cool down for a minute until you're done. So maybe twice a week, do 2 HIIT trainings like that. And then, you can do maybe a little bit of steady state, meaning where you'll say 70-75% of your max heart rate, or you can just take 170 or 180 minus your age and be at that heart rate. I would just mix it up. I wouldn't overthink it. I would do a variety of different things. You always want to make sure you're doing some resistance training, and I don't mean killing yourself, like 80% effort with the resistance training. You always want to do a little high intensity cardio to increase your VO2 max to make your heart strong. And it's nice I would love you to throw in some easy walks too if you want to do. You can just do walk for 30 minutes. Once or twice a week, because you always want to take breaks. Like I wouldn't do a high intensity like resistance training workout, and then maybe do that high intensity hit on the same day. You want to break it up a little bit. You want to go hard, easy, hard, easy. Another general rule is the longer you work out, the easier it should be. The shorter you work out, the harder it could be. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Let's see what else. Okay, let's see what Tony got. I was on 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂 and a ketogenic diet for too long. Yeah, I know that happens. I've done the same thing. Don't feel bad, Tony. We all do it. You get into these 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉, you get into this keto stuff, and if you get some results and then you kind of push it too far, I've done the same thing. That's why I always like changing things up and seeing what's working. It's still a big experiment. It's not all this stuff. It's not like, like you go to a doctor, you got high blood pressure, and the doctor said, okay, take this exact dose of this medicine because we've got all these studies saying that 50 milligrams is the ideal amount. There's intermittent fasting, there's ketogenic diets. These are all things you gotta experiment with. You gotta see what works best for you. So don't feel bad that you overdone it. We all have. Let's see what Brian's got here too. Mike, I do 𝘾𝙃 through the week. I like to get in a lot of protein at my meal, but can you? I don't. Okay. I don't think you're gonna get much benefit by taking in like a max of maybe 1 gram per pound the body weight. I don't think you're gonna get any more benefit from eating more than that. But it's really hard to eat too much protein, especially if you're doing 𝘾𝙃. I mean, how much could you really eat? Like a 16-ounce piece of like, fish or meat is gonna be about 100 grams of protein. Could you eat 1.5 pounds? Maybe you could get 150 grams, but I don't think you're gonna be eating like, a 3-pound piece of salmon or fish or something. You just won't. I think with 𝘾𝙃, I don't think you have to be concerned about too much protein. Definitely not. Let's see what we got here. Sometimes you get to eat some French fries. Yeah, I know. Sometimes you do. Hey, people don't like the term cheat days. I don't mind the term cheat days, but we all have to do them, now and then. Like Thanksgiving, I'm going to be eating pretty much anything I want. I love pumpkin pie. I probably only have it once or twice a year, so I'll definitely will be doing that. I'll be eating all the cool stuff for sure. That's true. Okay, so let's go back to the actual meal plan. So that's what I did. And then the actual schedule I did 18-6 𝘾𝙃 on my cardio days. I like to do that. So for example, why I did that is like I talked about earlier, on the days that I'm doing easier workouts, like just taking a long walk or doing a short hit, which is only going to last me 15-20 minutes. Those are the days when I want to be in a calorie deficit, only eat 2 meals, and I fasted for 18 hours. But on the days when I did my resistance training, I did more of a 16-8, right, where I fasted for 16 hours, took in all my calories in an 8-hour eating window, upped my calories by eating 3 meals. And this schedule, that worked really well for me. And I kept my normal training schedule. I worked that late morning, right around 11:30, 12. Broke my fast with my first meal around 12 to 2, depending upon whether I was fasting for 18 hours or 16 hours. And I had my last meal before 8 o'clock. And it worked pretty well. It worked pretty well for me. Let's see what Gene's got here. Okay. This keto diet is consistent calculation and preparation. I try to keep it simple. I just cut this. Yeah, I know. It is. And that's kind of what I'm talking. That's what I'm going to go into now. I think that's a great strategy, what you're doing. I personally... I didn't really I like the schedule of what I'm doing this week, but I don't like the 50 grams of carbs because it is somewhat restricting. And I don't like to, like you're saying, I don't have to like to try to get into ketosis, but I would almost call this like another book that I've read a couple times. And I just listened to it again during my works is 𝘾𝙃𝙃𝙃, who I like a lot. He's the guy who started this ancestral primal movement. One of his first books that came out must be 10-12 years ago now was like called The Primal Blueprint. Yeah, and I just listened to one of his relatively recent books. It was about 2 years old, called The Keto Reset, which is a 21-day program that gets you into ketosis, kind of reset your metabolism. Every now and then, I just want to make sure that I stay somewhat fat adapted, meaning that I like to go into ketosis just for a week or two, just to make sure that my glycogen levels are really empty with carbohydrates, just to make sure that I keep myself as a fat burner. See, I want that metabolic flexibility. That maybe when once I'm done with this schedule, which I'll be done around Thanksgiving, I may even do it. I may break at Thanksgiving and then go back to it and just finish out like the 2 or 3 week period. I know that I'm fat adapted. I know that I'm a fat burner, but I do find it a little taxing to keep a strict cutoff of 50 grams of carbs or less. Plus I'm not drinking any alcohol while I'm doing this, because the drinking alcohol will mess you up with ketosis. Typically I might have a glass of wine once or twice a week, so I'm doing none of that, and I do miss it. So after I make sure that I'm totally fat adapted, that I've been in ketosis for solid a couple of weeks, I'm gonna go back to more of like 100 grams of carbs a day. And plus it'll enable me to have a glass of wine once or twice a week. On a Saturday night, me and my wife may have split a bottle of wine or something once a week. So I that's more of a normal lifestyle for me. So I understand what you're saying, Gene. It's not easy doing this stuff, but I'm just experimenting like everybody else. Let's see what Tony's got to say here. Okay. At the beginning of keto, is it necessary to be strict to adapt? Then it is enough to reduce the quantity. It's really interesting. It gets, I know keto could be a little confusing. This is what I found. See, I find that I probably won't go into deep ketosis. Some people get those numbers like 2.5, 3, because I keep my protein, I think, on the high side. Like true ketogenic would be, 80% fat, maybe only like 10, 15% protein, and obviously extremely low carbs. Some people have to go like 20 grams of carbs. I'm not looking for deep ketosis. I just want to get into like a mild state of ketosis. But I do find that you have to eat a lot of fat. This is the only time, like what I'm doing here, these are some other changes that I made too, to make sure, like instead of me just having like my sardines or maybe some smoked salmon and avocado, for lunch, I'll take extra virgin olive oil and I'll pour it on, the avocado. You really do have to eat a lot of fat. I just listened to a podcast, Joe Rogan. He had Rhonda Kaufman. She's another one of these brilliant girls. She's a PhD. She specializes in all this biology type stuff. So, she's also good friends with Peter Attia, or all these, longevity experts. And she's been in ketosis, and she was talking about it on the Joe Rogan podcast. She was talking about how you really have to eat a lot of fat to get you into ketosis, because the type of foods you just like, if you're a person who eats tons of carbohydrates, you become a good carb burner. If you're eating a lot of fat, you become a good fat burner. That's one thing. And it also gets very confusing on when you measure ketones. Like the urine sips are really inaccurate, I find, because it may show that you're making ketones, but it won't show if you're actually burning them. That's the also confusing thing when it comes to like athletes or people like myself. Like when I first start a diet like this and I get into ketosis, and I used to do this, I'm tired of poking my finger, plus it's expensive, those ketone strips. I find that when you initially get into ketosis, you'll get higher like blood readings and higher indications that you're in ketosis. But just because those levels are high doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually burning the ketones. See, the ideal state is you want your brain, because the ketones, the brain can't burn fat. It can burn glucose, sugar, or it can burn ketones. You want your brain burning those ketones, but you want your muscles burning fat. That's when you become fat adapted. See, in the beginning, when you get into ketosis, your muscles could be burning some ketones. You could be getting rid of the So the more fat adapted you become, the higher your reading. The lower your readings might be when you're testing your ketone levels. It gets really confusing, and people get really upset when they do that. So I stopped doing all the measurements. A thing I would love to do, which one day I will, which I haven't done yet, is to wear one of those 24-hour glucose monitors. I think that would be a great thing to do. And it's getting popular now, like more and more people are doing it. Because when you're wearing a glucose monitor, you can eat a meal, look 45 minutes later, like what's your glucose response to that meal. And it's really different for everyone. Who talked about this a lot was Robin Wolf. He wrote the book, The Paleo Solution was his big famous book, but he also did a book, Wired to Eat, like why people are wired to eat food. And he talked about how like he was doing this with him and his wife, and like he would have a bagel, his wife would have a bagel. He would have like an insane glucose response to the bagel. Meanwhile, his wife's glucose didn't even go up that much, went up like 10 points. So you really, you don't really know how your body's going to respond to these carbohydrates or different foods until you wear like a 24-hour glucose monitor. I know Peter Attia is really a big fan of wearing 24-hour glucose monitors, but it all depends on how far you want to take it, right? I'm a little neurotic. I can drive myself nuts. That's why I don't like poking my finger constantly. Let's see, we got some more questions here. Let's see what Tony's got. Okay. Yes, for me, I took at least 200 grams of added fat and reduced the protein to avoid gluconeogenesis. Yes, I know. And if guys don't know, I totally agree, Tony. Sometimes you really have to do that. If you guys don't know, or gals don't know, what gluconeogenesis means is that when you're making glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, like you're turning fat into glucose, you're turning muscle, even protein, or not necessarily muscle, but proteins into glucose, gluconeogenesis, which is definitely an issue for sure. Okay, let's see what else Gene's got here. Let's see, Gene's needs to be adapted. Yeah, yes. Let's see what we got here. Nothing at all. Yes, for me to get. Okay, let's keep going. So this is what I've been doing generally now. And like I say, the cons for me is, first of all, only eating 50 grams of carbs, straight rule, no alcohol at all. And I don't mind the 24-hour fast. I can see myself doing that going forward. But let's talk about now what I'm going to do. So after Thanksgiving, after the first of the year, and I have to say this is a good strategy though. If you're concerned, well, let's talk about holidays in general. Like if you're concerned about gaining weight over the holidays, I just definitely think like 1 24-hour fast a week from now till New Year's. I think that's a great strategy. Just think, you just eliminated 2,500, 3,000 calories out of your diet right there. It like neutralizes Thanksgiving. If you fasted, like, so Thanksgiving's coming up next week, do 1 24-hour fast this week, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Or right after Thanksgiving, do it on Friday. You just neutralize that whole meal. Same thing with Christmas, right? Same thing with New Year's. Do it. Just throw a 24-hour fast in there. If you don't want to do the 20-hour fast, throw an OMAD day once a week in there. It'll definitely help you keep an eye on the calories, for sure. It can take a long time, no doubt, Tony, for sure, says Gene. I'm starting my 30 fast. Oh, sounds good, Gene. That sounds good. I know you've been doing that. You've been doing it on Mondays, which is wonderful. But I don't want to, even 24 is good. So don't be too hard on yourself. I want you to be able to stick. I know you're doing great, but make it, be like we say, 90% sure you're going to do it. Even 24 is good. But if you can do 36, wonderful. I think it's great. Great. Okay, let's talk about going forward. Oh, I didn't realize I changed this camera angle. I don't like this angle. I'm going to change cameras, guys. I like this one better. Okay. Yeah, so this is what I'm going to do going forward. I say out of all 3 of these schedules, after Thanksgiving, after the holidays, I think I'm going to settle. I think I'm going to settle into this. I'm probably going to do this strategy for at least a month, where I'm going to do a straight up 16-8. As opposed to like changing my intermittent fasting strategy every day, I'm going to try to do what Dr. Panda said. I'm going to stick to my normal circadian rhythm and kind of follow this schedule of eating the same time, waking up the same time, making sure I'm sleeping really well. I'm going to like really get in tune with my circadian rhythm. So I'm going to do 16-8. I'm going to skip breakfast. So that works with me. I think I'm going to go back to the essential amino acids to make sure I'm getting in a little bit of protein. I'm going to spend the money, the extra $50 a month on the essential aminos. I'm going to work out with the ideal time for me, which is that late morning-ish time, maybe around 11 o'clock or so. I generally don't work out for more than an hour. I'm also going to add in typically when I say my workout, that's typically my, I would say call it my response workout, meaning when I'm doing my harder resistance training or maybe I'm doing my high intensity type cardio. But I multiple days, I still will take a 30, 40, 60-minute walk easy, whether it be like first thing in the morning, 6 in the morning, or maybe at the end of the day before it gets dark. I don't even count that. That's like me meditating when I'm moving. Good for my brain. I just love walking. Clears my head. I burn a little bit of body fat. I just love it. So I'm not counting that. I always do my walks every single day. And I recommend everyone here just walk. Get outside and walk as much as possible. It's nothing better you can do for your health, for your mental health, for your physical health, to get outside and take a walk. As little as 10 minutes, it's been shown to have amazing health benefits. Okay. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to work out midday, then I have my first meal, 12 o'clock. I'll have my last meal by 8 p.m. I'll use that same strategy, 2 MAD, 3 MAD, where I'm going to be cycling my calories. If I find that, I can sense it because, guys, gals, I've been counting calories, bodybuilding for like 40 years. I know when I've been in like restricting calories a little too aggressively. So if I feel like I'm getting caught, I'll just take a diet break. So like what Tony did, I'll take a week or 2 off and just, up my calories and maybe not fast for a week or 2. I do that all the time. I'm going to stick back to my normal low carb, whole natural food diet, more like 100 grams of carbs a day. No processed foods, no junk, eating my normal like chicken, fish, eggs, fermented foods. I like to eat fermented foods every day too. Sauerkraut, pickles, my normal whole natural food, somewhat ancestral type diet. And I'm going to stick with this after the holidays. I may even do it after Thanksgiving. I'll see, for at least a month, and then reassess. So I hope you guys enjoyed these. I know this, it's kind of like a little bit up in the air, these videos, but in that, some people like to say, do it this one way. There's no one right way to do this intermittent fasting, time restricted eating. You got to really find what works for you, for sure. But let's do some Q&A. I think Brian's got a question here. Let's see what we got. Okay, Mike. Okay, Mike, I've done a few 48-hour fasts. How often do you recommend I should do that? I think it's interesting. They were talking about that today. I listened to a podcast when I was walking today, The Diet Doctor. A great podcast. They talk about low-carb eating. They talk about intermittent fasting. And the podcast I listened to was specifically on time-restricted eating, and they had 3 experts. The last guy was a doctor who wasn't against fasting, but he was cautioned. Like he said, there are no real studies. There aren't too many studies on fasting for 48 hours consistently. Like clinical studies. There just aren't too many. I think 48 hours is just about the number where you won't want to run into trouble. I think like that 36 is ideal, and I think you can do that pretty regularly. If I would say, Brian, it more has to do with your food quality. Like when you do eat, are you getting enough vitamins, minerals, and nutrients? Are you make sure you're getting enough protein? Are you protein deficient? Things like that. And maybe every couple of weeks you can do a 24-hour fast. I personally very rarely do that. I love the 24-hour fast. I love the 36-hour fast. I very rarely go 48. Maybe once a quarter. Sometimes I say to myself, I'm going to do a 36-hour fast. I'm feeling so good. I'm not hungry, and I'm saying, okay, let me go 48. But I very rarely do that. Plus, it's interesting. Like we talked about, like 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂, or it seems that when it comes to like losing muscle mass, some people are concerned like extended fasting loses muscle mass. It seems like that's almost, and this is exactly what the doctor talked about today in the podcast. It seems like that's almost the sweet spot. Once you start fasting beyond 48 hours, he pointed out that people start losing a percentage of muscle mass every single day beyond the 48-hour fast. I've heard other people talk about this, and they'll say, who don't agree with that, and they'll say, oh, there's a rebound effect. Your organs, shrink when you're fasting for 48 hours. As soon as you just go back to your normal life and start eating again, the muscle mass comes back. And then the doctor was a little, it wasn't specific on exactly where the muscle, I know Dr. Jason Fung will say that when you're doing these extended fasts, you're not really losing muscle tissue. You're losing other type proteins. You're losing connective tissue. That's why Dr. Jason Fung might say, you're not going to get the saggy skin when you fast, because that's the protein, that's the gluconeogenesis. That's where the weight's coming off when you do these extended fasts. So it's hard to say. As long as you're feeling good, I would say this. Make sure you're never losing strength when you're doing these extended fasts. Actually, grip strength, it's amazing how grip strength is such a good indicator, first of all, of longevity. Like people who have very poor grip strength, they'll live as long, and if you feel like you simple things, like you can't carry something, you can't open a jar, you feel, if you're in the gym, you can see instantly, are you getting weaker? You don't want to get weaker. You can be a little tired, maybe when you're not having the calories and all that, but if you really feel like you're physically you're not as strong because you're doing these 48-hour fasts too consistently, then I would cut back, for sure. Let's see what Gene's got to say here. Okay, what do you think about bulletproof coffee with whey protein in the breakfast replacement every morning? See, I would say too, okay, it's interesting because that's another, I was talking about all these books I'm reading. Dave Asprey, he's the bulletproof guy. I just listened to his book. I read all his books, but I just listened to his new book. He did one on fasting. And this is what he said, which it kind of addresses this question. I don't know, sometimes it's hard to believe everything he says because he's selling so many products, and he has the bulletproof coffee and all that. He says, he's kind of saying it depends what your goal is for the fast. He says that when you put his bulletproof liquid, which is his bulletproof liquid is it's almost like those medium chain triglycerides, has ketone bodies. He says you're not really going to break your fast because you're not really going to get the insulin spike. Plus, you're going to be getting these ketones, which are going to help you stay in ketosis. It makes your brain feel amazing. So even though you are taking in calories, which would technically break your fast, it's not going to give you that big insulin spike. Okay, so when it comes to the bulletproof coffee, if that's what your goal is that you don't mind taking in some calories and you want those ketone bodies and you want all that, but it's probably okay. In your case, Dave, Gene, it might be okay, but when it comes to the whey protein, that's a little different, because then you're getting, whey protein will give you a good spike in insulin, even though there are no real carbohydrates in there. Like, I like whey protein isolate, so that will definitely break your fast, plus it's 100 calories. So if you're doing, and I also don't like the idea of mixing a fat with a high spiking macronutrient. Like, for example, you may not necessarily want that big spike that the whey protein will give you if you're taking along a lot of fat calories at the same time. And I know these are much healthier fat calories than like a donut, but a donut would be an example of that. Like, you're taking in like a low quality fat, like a vegetable oil, seed oil, with a high glycemic carbohydrate, which is going to give you a big spike. So you don't want to spike insulin and have a lot of fat running in your system. So I would rather you do either one. Meaning that if you want to do, like, if you find like fasting in the morning is difficult, or especially when you're doing that 36-hour fast on Mondays, I would say either just do the bulletproof coffee, without the whey protein. Just so, you're not really going to get a spike in insulin. You'll probably be less hungry during the day. You get a little bit of ketone bodies, which kind of make the brain feel good. But I probably wouldn't do the whey protein with it. Or you can do the opposite. Or if you say, I need a little calories, to do a 36, 48-hour fast. I want to make sure I'm getting enough protein. I don't mind if I get a little bit of a spike. It's going to knock me out of my fast for an hour or two, just taking in 100 calories and 25 grams of protein. Maybe you can do that. Some people sip bone broth during their fast. See, bone broth, is pretty much protein, sodium. It doesn't have, bone broth doesn't have all those essential amino acids. It's missing some, whereas a whey protein has them all. So I would experiment with it. But that's what I mean. If you're really going to fast for 36 hours, how bad is it to really take in like 100 calories of whey protein? I don't think it's all that bad at all. You're going to be in such a calorie deficit for 36 hours anyway, right? I don't think it's that big of a deal. Let's see. Okay, Gene, for me, bulletproof coffee is just a meal replacement and is effective at curbing appetite. I agree. For the entire morning, not to be taken. Okay, that sounds good. No, I think that's fine. So if you're using it like that, if you're using it as a meal replacement, I think it's great. So that's why maybe, so if you're putting the whey protein in it, that would be like instead of having a meal. But I think I still would rather you split it up, because that whey protein, and do it. I think you said you were doing it like after you work out. I think that's better to do the whey post workout, and maybe just do the bulletproof coffee in the morning. Truthfully, if Dave Asprey showed up at this live stream, he knows the science really well. He would probably out debate me on it and give you numerous reasons why it's a great idea to do that, to do the bulletproof coffee in the morning. He also is into, I think he also does, he has the bulletproof, and he also puts butter in the coffee. He emulsifies, he mixes it up. He thinks there's something to the circulation of it that it helps you absorb it better. It's kind of interesting stuff. Okay. All right, guys. So let's get some. I got some time here. How long are we going? We're going 55 minutes. Any other questions about anything? Fitness, health, weight loss. I'll give you a little time. I know there's always like a little bit of a delay. Sometimes I'll say something. It takes maybe a minute for you guys to come back with something. That's good. I'd say I am looking forward, though, to going back to 100 grams of carbs and having a glass of wine now and then. I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving more than usual this year, because I've been, doing this keto diet for the last week or so. It should be interesting. Any other questions, guys, gals? Oh, that's good. And thanks again, Gene, for that super chat. My first one ever, so it's really great. It's great to know it's appreciated. Okay. Oh, yeah, we got some workout questions. Let's see. Okay. One-arm dumbbell press. What is your thoughts? It's interesting. It's definitely one-arm dumbbell, meaning bench press over the head. Okay, I'll assume you meant bench press. It's interesting because there's definitely obviously more of a core challenge, because you have to stabilize your whole body. I'd be a little careful to make sure where the range of motion is coming from. I find that when you're just doing a one arm, you know, like your opposing body is going to rotate, and I would just be careful, but I think it's fine. If you're talking about a one-arm dumbbell press, I love them, do them all the time. I personally like an upside down kettle press where I hold the kettlebell. The reason why I love holding the kettlebell, and it has, it's long, it really works your grip strength, and I got that from 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂. He's the guy who wrote all those textbooks on lower back pain. He's a big believer in those like upside down kettlebell carries. I do those too. Like I'll walk just holding a kettlebell in one hand. When you're holding, you say in your right hand, great challenge to the 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂 because you want to twist, you want to rotate on the opposite side. Great for grip strength. I love one-arm dumbbell presses. When it comes to bench pressing one-arm dumbbells, I've never, I fool around with it here and there, but I don't really do that. I don't really do those. I find that it just wants to throw me off the bench. So I'm not crazy about that. Let's see what we got here. Okay, I put olive oil, MCT, and 2 raw eggs. Whoa, into my bulletproof coffee. Pretty cool. Well, that actually, I do like. To me, that doesn't make sense because the eggs are not going to spike insulin like whey protein does. For some reason, I've read studies there's whey protein concentrate, isolate will spike insulin. 2 eggs won't. So I think that's a great meal replacement, Gene. I think you're right on there. I love the olive oil too, because it has monounsaturated fats. You get the MCT, or maybe a little coconut oil, and then the two raw eggs. I think that's a much better choice. I think that's actually a very good meal replacement. I think you're right on track. I'm happy you said that. That's great. Okay. I don't know if I'm going back into ketosis after my. Yeah, I don't think you have to, Tony. First of all, Mark Sesson uses this term. That's why I repeat the term metabolic flexibility. If you just go into ketosis, even for a few days, you've trained yourself to be like a fat burner. Doesn't mean that you have to live your life in ketosis. I know some people do, and it's fine, but I really want more of that metabolic flexibility, where if I do want to go in ketosis, I eat a low carb diet, I can easily get there in a day or two. Even maybe a 24-hour fast might put me in ketosis. And I consider myself like somewhat fat adapted. I'm a good fat burner. Sometimes I'll time my carbohydrates around my workouts, and that's a good technique. And then I do take cheat days and diet breaks from time to time. So I want the metabolic flexibility. I'm definitely much more of a fat burner than the average person walking around, not even close. And I like to sometimes just reset myself with a little ketosis, but doesn't mean you have to stay in ketosis all the time. I'm always looking for the best of both worlds. Let's see what we got. Yeah, standing one-arm. Yeah, I think that's a great. I love a one-arm press because that's a good way to challenge like your whole body. You lift something over your head like that. Just think your body wants to fall to one side. You got to dig in on that opposing side. 𝘾𝙊𝘾𝙃𝙄𝙉𝙂, everything. I think it's a great movement too. I love one-arm overhead presses. Even not necessarily reverse kettlebell, even just dumbbell or whatever. I think it's a great movement. Oh, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, thanks. I really appreciate it. I'm breaking records today with these super chats. I've never gotten super chats before. I really appreciate it. So, to today, wonderful. I really appreciate it, Ryan. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to write everyone's name down. I won't forget today all the people who gave me super chats. I feel like I'm more appreciated. Thank you. Let's see, Gene. Let's see what Gene's got here. Okay. If I was to do a 500 calories a day diet for a month, do you think I should keep doing my 30-minute? Okay, see, Gene, I don't know if I would want you to me, I think I like more of the other stuff you're talking about, like maybe fasting 24, 36 hours, and then maybe doing more like a 16-8. That to me is like being in like a fasting mimicking state, only 500 calories for a solid month. I don't think you won't be able to take in enough protein. You won't be getting all your vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. I wouldn't do that. Not that you're not going to lose some weight. And the fact that it's only a month, I think you'll get too much metabolic adaptation, and that's going to slow your metabolism down too much. I mean, the working out 30 minutes, you always should be working out. Look at it like this. You never should restrict calories or do any of these fasting strategies to the point where you feel that you can't work out for 30 minutes, right? If you feel like you can't get a good 30-minute workout in, because you're fasting too much or you're not eating enough, you know that whatever strategy you're doing is not the right strategy for you. It's not going to be long term. It may produce some good temporary results, but it's not good. So I wouldn't want you to do only 500 calories a day. I mean, you can do something like, I don't want to throw too many things at you. Like, I do like the 5-2 diet. The 5-2 intermittent fasting diet is where you eat normally for 5 days, and then 2 days of the week on non-consecutive days, you only eat 25% of your normal calories. So for a lot of people, that may be 500, 700 calories. I think a strategy like that would work, because then you're boosting your metabolism on the days where you're taking in more calories. You're getting all your vitamins, minerals, nutrients, taking in good protein for 5 days, and then 2 days out of the week, you're in kind of somewhat extreme calorie restriction. Maybe you make sure you're taking a little protein. You'll be able to work out on those other days. Maybe you take a long walk on the days that you're only eating 500 calories on those 2 days. But I wouldn't want you to do it. That's almost like the Biggest Loser type stuff, where people were doing, working out like crazy. Even though 30 minutes is not overdoing it, but working out a lot and then aggressively restricting calories, it'll mess up your metabolism long term. Maybe you can do it for a week, but I wouldn't go beyond that. Let's see what we got. Don't starve yourself, Sean. No, I agree. I agree, definitely. He means yes. He means Gene. Yeah, I agree. I think that's going too far. And plus, Gene, I think you're doing. I'm really happy for you. I think you're right on track. It's like slow and steady, consistent. And I love that whole thing, that 90% rule. I talked about it before. Like any program, diet, workout schedule, anything you decide you're going to do, you got to be 90% sure you're going to do it. And I don't want the 90% rule to be misunderstood. It's not like you have to make it so hard. I mean, it should be easy. It should be so easy that you're 90% sure that you're going to stick with it. And if you're not 90% sure you can do it, if you have any doubts beyond like 10%, find a different strategy, find a different schedule. The whole thing with all this stuff is like consistency, creating momentum. It gets easier and easier because you get so excited. And like me, like when I first went into this week, when I first did my 24-hour fast, it wasn't a big deal. But now that I feel like I've done it for a week, I feel my body fat went down a little bit. I look in the mirror, I get a little excited. Say, hey, okay, I'll do it for another week or two. It's motivational when you create some momentum. For sure. All right, guys. Any questions? Ryan, you have any specific question? Anything for me? Let's see. That's what Gene said. Small changes works now because I'm heavy, but I will have to step it up. Yes, I would say yes and no, Gene. You'd be surprised, and it's cumulative in that. Yes, it's easier for you to lose weight initially like this, but you're going to make so many improvements to your metabolism, like from eating this way, from eating more of a lower carb, by eating healthier. You're going to get so many other benefits that yes, you're a smaller person, and percentage-wise, you may not be losing weight as quickly, but on a percentage basis, it might be the same. Right? And you're going to be becoming more fat adaptive. Your insulin levels are going to lower. You're probably going to reverse. Maybe right now, since you have a lot of weight to lose, you might be a little bit insulin resistant. You may be leptin resistant. You may be somewhat pre-diabetic. All your numbers are going to improve. You're going to get rid of the inflammation in your body. So many good things are going to happen, and it's cumulative. So even though you may not be losing, like I like to say, 1% of your body weight per week is pretty good. When you get smaller, obviously you're not going to lose as much, but you're going to be long term. It's going to be so much better. Yeah. Okay. Just dropping in for a few minutes to listen. Everyone's having awesome. Oh, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Let's see. Gabby's here too. Okay. How should I calculate my maintenance calories and weight loss calories? Okay, I've said this before, and it's hard to give you a concrete rule, but I like to say, and I know actually there are, you can Google this, and you can probably go to a website where they have a calculator there, and you can just put in your weight and your goal weight, and it'll kind of spit something out at you, which can be reasonably accurate. But I like to say weight loss calories is a real easy rule: 10 times your body weight, 10 even 11 times your body weight. I'm a little more leery to say that if a small woman, a petite woman, who's only like 110 pounds, some 110-pound women want to weigh 95 pounds, I think 10 times is too little. I wouldn't go below 1,200 calories consistently. But let's say you're 200 pounds, you go 10 times your body weight, 2,000 calories a day, or 11 times 2,200. That's a nice calorie deficit, I think, to be in. I think there's a good, reasonable calorie deficit without, doing an intense calculation. You can also go get an app too, and you can also Google it, and it can measure, your activity level, like it change those numbers around a little bit. Even MyFitnessPal, which is the app I like a lot, I'll give you a good calculation for restricting calories. But 10, 11 times your body weight. And then when it comes to maintenance calories, I like to say, 500 to 750 calories above, say, 10 times your body weight. So let's say you're 200 pounds, right? You decide to go with 2,000 calories a day on restricting days. And then maintenance calories, you're at about 2,700, 2,750. And these are general calculations. I mean, unfortunately, you got to just do it in an experiment. And like anything, too, it gets complicated calories, because even when you're looking these foods up, who really knows? Like a banana is 100 calories. Is it a big banana? Is it a small banana? Is it really 80 calories? Is it really 120 calories? I mean, you got to just, baseline it. But I do think everyone at one point in their life should track calories, proteins, fats, and carbs, track your macros for a few weeks, even a week or two, just to get an idea of where you're at calorie-wise. But that is one of the big advantages of intermittent fasting, is that when you do these schedules, when you fast for 16 hours, 18 hours, you automatically eat less. By shortening your eating window, you're going to be in a calorie-restricted state most of the time. See, I'm so good at it. That's why I love the strategy of doing different intermittent fasting strategy every day. Like one day, when you fast for 20 hours and then give yourself a 4-hour eating window, you'll automatically be in a deficit. Or you do an OMAD day. The next day you go to 18-6, you eat a little bit more. The next day you go to 16-8, you eat a little bit more. So you're not overdoing it. Since I'm so good at doing this, I can do more of that circadian rhythm with time-restricted eating, and I cycle my calories from some days eating 2 meals a day, some days eating 3 meals a day. There's all different ways of doing it. But unfortunately, when you do lose weight, your metabolism is going to slow down. You're a smaller person, which is a good thing. But you just don't want to over-exaggerate restricting calories for extended periods of time, because you can over-exaggerate the metabolic adaptation, just like I talked about with those studies about the people who participated in The Biggest Loser. They overdid it. They restricted calories too long. They messed up their metabolism. Not that it's not reversible, but it can really take a long time. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, do you think 5-2 diet could be used as a weight? I think it's a great, definitely. I think it's a great, definitely, Gene. I mean, you can get down to your goal weight, and then you can say going forward, 5 days a week, you're going to just eat a good, healthy, normal, maintenance calories, type thing. And then 2 days a week, you're always going to cut back. Maybe 2 days a week, you do you eat 700 calories only. I think there's a good long-term strategy for sure. I think that could definitely work. Okay, should I eat only when I'm hungry, even if I don't hit my recommended calorie intake or protein intake? I would say, obviously you don't want to, force yourself to eat when you're not hungry. I find that if you're not hungry, it's such a good indicator that you're doing a good job, because most people who are hungry, not most people, a lot of people who are hungry are malnourished. They're not getting, they're lacking, I did a whole video on that. What was that called again? The protein, I forget what it's called. There's one theory on weight loss saying that when people will keep on eating to make sure they get, I think there's the protein hypothesis theory, meaning that people will keep on eating until they reach their protein requirements, wherever that might be. Meaning that, say you're once again, you're a 200 pounds person, your protein requirements say 150 grams of protein a day. If you don't eat 150 grams of protein, you're going to keep on eating until you reach those 150 grams. Also, I think who else talks about this? Another good book that I read, Shawn Stevenson. I like his podcast too. It's the Modern Health podcast. He wrote a book recently talking about, he thinks why a lot of people are hungry, because they're just not getting certain vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. Say you're low in vitamin B, you're going to keep on eating till you get enough vitamin B, similar to that protein hypothesis theory. So the fact that you're not hungry, I think it's good. I mean, hey, I probably wouldn't eat if you're not hungry, unless you're doing something really, really specific. I mean, if you're doing, the only thing, some people when they go keto are never hungry, right? Because you're not getting the instant spike. I mean, that's the only thing. If you're doing, I would say, Gabby, if you're doing more of like a very low fat, I mean, a very low carb ketogenic type diet, then I would probably make an effort to maybe eat when you're not hungry. But otherwise, even if you're doing low carb, I probably wouldn't eat when you're not hungry, as long as you're making, as long as you're getting in enough protein when you do eat, and like that rule, I don't know if you were here earlier, I like 0.9 grams per pound of lean body weight. So typically if you're a 150 pound gal, take in, 120, 125 grams of protein a day. Okay, but that's a good question. That's an interesting question for sure. Anything else, guys, gals? Anything? All right, I'm gonna go in a couple. Let's see what we got. Gene's got something. Jason Fung here, one of my favorites. Jason Fung says that fasting does not make the metabolism crash, though. Yeah, I know, it's interesting because he feels, but if you, I must have listened. I've read that obesity quotes. 3 times. I listened to it so many times when I'm walking. He does believe in for sure in the those counter-regulatory hormones. Like once you've been fasting for like 48 hours, counter-regulatory hormones do kick in. Like the cortisol, the stress hormones, which will boost your metabolism, release carbohydrates. Human growth hormones get kicked in. So that's true to a degree. But he also talks a lot about, also in the book, about like the set point theory, where, for example, whenever you do lose weight, right, he said your metabolism, your body will do anything it can to get you to gain that weight back. And he feels like one of the only ways to reverse your set point, like say your set point is 250 pounds. You go down to 125, you cut back on calories, you eat healthy. He says, it's almost impossible because your body's going to do anything it can to get you back up to that 250 pounds. It's going to slow your metabolism down. It's going to release hormones to make you hungry. But what he does think, like you're saying, Gene, he thinks that fasting or keeping like insulin levels extremely low is one of the only ways, or maybe the best way, to reset your set point. So yes, I do think that fasting, in my opinion, is better than just straight up restricting calories when you're losing weight. Because when you're fasting, you're keeping insulin levels low, you're kind of like improving how your metabolism, how your body works. Even though restricting calories can work too, but restricting calories like long term seems to, unless you're like a bodybuilder and you're fanatical and you can really be disciplined and ignore hunger and you're just like going to stick to your calorie restriction and then take diet breaks and cycle your calories, I think fasting is a better approach, especially when you couple it with a low carb, whole natural food diet for sure. Okay, let's see what Gabby says. I'm a sedentary female and obese of 403, 2,200 calories a day and eating 130 grams of protein for weight loss, a good amount to make sure I lose. I think you can probably go, Gabby, I don't want to mess you up. I think you can go more than 2,600 calories a day. If you're not hungry and you're eating 2,600 calories a day, I probably would even go more than 130 grams of protein, but that's a reasonable amount. I'd rather see you more. I think 130. Maybe 150, maybe a little bit more protein. 2,600 calories. If you can get by with 2,600, maybe cycle, maybe like one day do 26, maybe one day do more than that and see. If you're losing 1% of your body weight per week, if you're losing 3-4 pounds a week consistently, eating 130 grams of protein. Some people like to say, what's your goal weight? Is your goal weight, I don't know, is your goal weight 200, then eat 200 grams of protein. Some people will do that. But I would say I would say that's the minimum is 130 grams of protein. I'd probably just like to see you eat more and probably take in even a little bit more protein. And don't, it's a slow and steady process. You can do it. Just be slow and steady with it. Don't do anything extreme. I hope you're walking. I would say definitely walk. You can say on the days, I would love you to walk every day, as much as you can, even 3 10-minute walks. Just stay active, stay moving. Just eliminate the sugars, the processed foods, whole natural food diet. You can do it. Keep on checking in. I think I checked out I think you started a YouTube channel and you were documenting your journey. I'll check it out after this too and see how you're doing. Let's see what we got. Hey Mike, thanks for stopping by, Mike. Cool. I know you stopped by before. That's great. All right, any other questions, guys, gals, before I go? You've been going an hour 16, maybe got another couple minutes. Let's see. Okay, I heard that you should mix up your intermittent fasting protocols each day for better results to confuse the body. I say that I talked about a lot, Gabby. Actually on this live stream, I'll give you a quick review. See, initially, I still do that. I love that strategy where you keep on changing up your intermittent fasting strategy from day to day. And I think the main benefit of doing that, first of all, it's good for boredom. Plus, it's a good way to cycle your calories. Like, for example, on a day where you're fasting for 16 hours and you're taking in all your calories in an 8-hour eating window, compared to a day where, say, you're doing an OMAD, when you're fasting for 23 hours, you're going to eat more food on the 16-8 day. And I even have a whole intermittent fasting course that goes into this thing in great detail, where you're changing your fasting strategy every single day. So you're cycling your calories. You don't have to count calories. So let's say Monday you're doing 16-8 and you're eating like only 2 meals. The next day you're doing like an 18-6. The next day you're not fasting at all. You're eating 3 meals. You're upping your metabolism and eating more food. So you don't necessarily have to count calories, but you're cycling your calories. So I think that is a big advantage of constantly changing your intermittent fasting strategy. But what I talked about in this particular live stream is that I went over 3 schedules that took a different approach. There's also the other way of looking at fasting and time-restricted eating is that you want to stick with your normal circadian rhythm, that you want to get your body used to like waking up the same time every day, eating the same time every day, going to sleep the same time every day. And that's kind of what I talked about in these 3 particular schedules, like doing a 16-8 every single day for an extended period of time, or an 18-6, But I think both ways are valid and both ways can work. Okay, let's see what Mike's got. Okay, I do fasting on Mondays every other week. I also eat no carbs on Mondays and Wednesdays every week, while intermittent 18-6 every day. I think that sounds great. Mike. I like it. You're mixing it up, so you're going for like those Mondays, very low calorie days. You're getting the benefits of being in like a 24-hour type fast. You're doing low carbs Monday, Wednesday, and then an 18-6. I think that's great. But I also too, I still would want you to stick with all those normal rules. Make sure you're getting enough protein, making sure you're getting enough vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, and just make sure that you don't ever get caught. Meaning that you don't want to get behind the 8 ball and like take this too far. Every now and then, you may want to take a diet break. Take 2 weeks off. Make sure you're at least at maintenance calories. Make sure you're getting in vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, especially when you get down to your goal weight. Just make sure you don't malnourish yourself ever by like doing a strategy like that for like a year. I think that would be taking it maybe a little bit too far. Just keep that in mind. I've done it to myself. I've taken it too far. And some other people in the room have taken it too far as well. But just keep that in mind. Okay. Sleep is indeed, no doubt about it. I think for me, sleep is one of the biggest indicators, just how things are going for me. Like, how's my life going? Can I sleep without waking up 5 times during the night? And obviously, sleep affects other factors besides diet and just life in general, work and family and things like that. If you got a lot of things on your mind, you just got things troubling you, or you're pushing yourself too hard, and you find yourself waking up 3, 4, 5 times a night, or you wake up in the middle of the night. That's why I love my 4-7-8 breathing. It works so well for me. I wake up in the middle of the night. I do this 4-7-8 breathing where I breathe in for 4 seconds. I hold that breath for 7 seconds, blow out for 8. 5 or 6 repetitions of that. I'm back to sleep. It works so well for me. I got that from Andrew Wild. That's another Harvard doctor who wrote that first book. I think what was it? I think 14 days to optimal health. He had that in there, 4-7-8 breathing. I even did a video about it. I like it so much. Okay, let's see what Mike's got. Oh, thanks. Oh no, I appreciate it, Mike. Yeah, I know, and also I don't want to throw you off. You sound like you're doing great, but just keep it in mind, not to overdo it. Okay. Thanks, Mike. We'll be postponing my 500 calories diet for now. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a little too much, Gene. You're doing too good now anyway. But after Christmas, I might try it once I get within reach. That sounds good. Yeah, try it for a week and see what happens. But I know you're going to do it. You got some momentum. You're doing great. I'm really happy for you, Gene. Oh, that's great, Mike. Excellent. So you know what you're doing. That's good. I think it's great. To take a week off here and there, perfect. You're doing great. All right, guys. I appreciate everything. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try to keep with the schedule. I kind of like Sundays. You know, maybe I'll start doing the live stream every Sunday. I still haven't pinpointed an exact time to do these live streams, but I'm going to try to do one once a week. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in. I love I really appreciate the super chats and everything. So wonderful. Everyone have an amazing Thanksgiving. Thanks, Mike. Have an amazing Thanksgiving. Happy, healthy to everyone. And hopefully it's going to be an amazing year, 2022, right? We all hope. All right, take care, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for tuning in. See you soon, guys.